The HOA dumped broken concrete at the end of my driveway, called it, at community enhancement. I called it what it was, rural vandalism with a business card. And when I saw the sign that said, improved by Pine Trace HOA, I knew someone had just peed on the wrong property line. So I responded the only way a mechanic knows how, with 8 tons of legally placed karma. Ever had your home improved without asking? Me just drop where you're watching from. They say don't start fights with quiet folks, because we don't yell, we document. At 5:30 that morning, I was walking out to feed the chickens when I saw it, me. A pile of rebar and busted concrete stacked like a tombstone for common sense, stuck in the middle. A plastic sign bolted to a rusty pipe that read, Visual Improvement Pine Trace HOA. That wasn't a suggestion. It was a declaration of war written in Comic Sans, me. And I don't know who taught Gwen Tinsley that unsolicited concrete was a peace offering, but she just gifted me a lawsuit starter kit. I called the number listed on the HOA flyer that had mysteriously shown up in my mailbox 3 weeks ago. Gwen answered like she was managing a Fortune 500 company instead of a cold D-sack militia. I said, Mom, there's concrete blocking my livestock gate. She didn't even blink. Your yard violates the emotional integrity of our community. Emotional integrity. My rooster has more emotional range than her whole HOA board, and he's missing half a toe. I grew up in this house. My grandfather built the barn with his bare hands and taught me 2 rules: treat folks right, me, and don't ever let anyone move your fences without asking. Gwen clearly missed that memo, probably too busy issuing citations for lawn gnome misconduct. I pulled out the original deed from 1962 and started reading, and just like that, a little red line on an old plat map lit up my morning like a gospel choir. That access road the HOA depends on. Yep, me, it runs dead through 200 feet of my property. No easement, no contract, just a handshake from Grandpa that ended the minute Gwen poured rubble in my driveway. And the best part, me, that community access road was their only road. Without it, they'd have to loop 4 miles around the back county trail, if the mud didn't swallow their hybrids first. As I stared out the window at the pile of passive aggression dressed as construction waste, I thought, you want improvement, Gwen? I'll show you structural reform. But I'll do it quiet. Professional. Me, the way Grandpa would have handled it. With blueprints, not bullets. With courtesy and concrete of my own. Ever had someone drop a cement block on your life and call it a favor? Stick around. Because next, me, Gwen tries to inspect my soul with a clipboard. Gwen Tinsley could laminate a napkin and call it binding law. She once fined a man for having a flagpole that leaned emotionally left. So when I opened my mailbox to find a glossy, me full-color HOA expansion notice, I knew I wasn't just being managed, I was being rewritten. According to her, my ranch had now been welcomed into the Pine Trace lifestyle zone. No vote, no consent. Me, just Gwen and her Sharpie marching across boundaries like she was drawing a treasure map with my land as the prize. I dragged out my grandfather's old filing cabinet, oak, rusted hinges. Me smelled like tobacco and dusted regrets. Buried under tax receipts and faded warranty cards was the original 1962 deed. I unfolded it like it was the Constitution and traced the lines with my finger. And there it was. Clearer than daylight after a storm, the AOA's only access road ran directly through 200 feet of our property. Not shared, not deeded, me. Just tolerated for 30 years under the sacred rural rule of, don't be a jerk. I called Gwen just to see if maybe, just maybe, she didn't realize what she'd done. Me, she answered like I was interrupting her TED Talk on mulch aesthetics. Malam, I said calmly, this road is on my land. Her response, me, it's being spiritually integrated into the neighborhood. Spiritually integrated. That's not a legal term. That's something a cult leader says right before they pass out the punch. Me. I hung up before I threw the phone into the sink. Later that afternoon, Darla Perkins came by with her infamous rhubarb pie and a whistleblower grin. She'd been one of the folks Gwen leaned on, hard. Claimed her birdbath was contributing to suburban stagnation. Told another neighbor their house needed repainting, to better reflect community ambition. Darla had records too. Threat letters, me. Faked citations, even a voicemail where Gwen offered to assist with relocation if compliance wasn't achieved. I wasn't dealing with a neighbor, me. I was dealing with a paper tyrant who ruled with font size and fake bylaws. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my grandfather's red surveyor pen. I circled the access road and wrote one word above it. Me. Mine. It wasn't about chickens or lawn gnomes anymore. It was about control. And Gwen, she was about to learn the downside of trespassing on land maintained by a man who owns a tractor, a legal folder, me, and a very long memory. When someone shouts, for the community, always check whose wallet they're reaching for, and whose land they're standing on without permission, me. Paper power means nothing when the dirt underneath tells a different story. She took the road for granted. I took it back with proof. Next, I draw a line that even Gwen can't cross, me. When your enemy wears pearls to an argument about livestock, you know the drama's about to go biblical. Gwen Tinsley showed up on my front pasture like she was preparing to declare eminent domain, me. Armed with a clipboard, a 12-megapixel phone, and heels that hadn't seen mud since the Clinton administration. She started snapping photos like my rooster's feathers were committing tax fraud. "Mom," I said, wiping grease from my hands, "you're trespassing." She didn't even blink, me. "I'll have my attorney fax you the spirit of compliance." She walked straight to the corner of my barn like she'd been appointed by the governor himself. Clicking pictures, narrating them like a crime podcast. Non-permitted poultry structure, unregulated equipment storage. Me visual disharmony. I almost offered her a chair and a glass of sweet tea just to see if her spine would snap from the effort of standing so righteous. Instead, I walked into my house, grabbed the 1962 deed, and came back out holding it like it was gospel. "Show me where it says I'm part of your HOA," I said, spreading the document out on my truck bed. Her eyes darted like a raccoon caught on camera. She fumbled for her binder, muttering about county overlays and expansion authority. But her mouth stalled while her fingers flipped paper like a magician with no trick, me. I pointed to the red, lined boundary where her fancy road ran straight through my grandfather's easement. "You've been borrowing this land for 30 years, I said, me. "I'm just calling the favor due." She blurted out, "You're being aggressively non-compliant?" Like I just insulted her grandmother's casserole. Then she backed away slowly, me. Like my fence posts were radioactive. Back inside, I unfolded the blueprint of my property on the kitchen table, ran a fresh line with a red Sharpie, and circled the 200 feet of road like I was drawing a target, me. I called Big Hank's Hauling and said, "I need 8 concrete barriers delivered next Friday, 4 tons apiece." He didn't ask why, just asked how close to the property line I wanted them, me. "Microscopic," I said. "We're talking legal hair splitting," because if Gwen wanted to quote spirit law, I was about to answer with mass and gravity. That night, I poured myself a drink and watched the dusk settle across my driveway like calm before a concrete sermon. My land wasn't just dirt, it was my family's legacy, and by the time I was done, me. Those boundaries weren't going to be suggestions anymore. They'd be carved in cement reinforced with law, and blessed with a healthy dose of poetic justice. You can't spell compliance without con, but you can spell concrete. With every ounce of your patience finally running out, she thought my boundary was a guideline. I made it a monument. Next, me, the barriers drop and so does her jaw. If diplomacy fails, try a forklift, me. That's what I told Big Hank when he rolled up with 8 2-ton concrete barriers strapped to his flatbed, like holy scripture ready to be delivered, me. The crane operator nodded like a man who's seen enough HOA wars to stop asking questions. By 10:15 a.m. the Great Wall of McRae was fully installed, each slab precisely measured, legally placed, me in space just wide enough to let a toddler through but not a Tesla. The only road into Gwen's glitter-covered kingdom now looked like a medieval blockade, just with better engineering. At 10:34 a.m., Gwen's white SUV pulled up and screeched to a confused halt. She sat there for 5 long minutes, frozen like a robot waiting for new code, me. Then the car door slammed with the force of someone who had never heard no, and wasn't about to start learning it now. She marched to the first barrier in white heels and a sports bra that said, "Serenity now," which was ironic, given what came out of her mouth. "Who authorized this atrocity?" she shrieked, me stomping around like she thought volume replaced jurisdiction. I stepped onto my porch and sipped coffee slow enough to be classified as meditation. "Mom, this is private property," I said with courtroom calm. "Standard security placement for unauthorized traffic flow." She kicked the nearest barrier like it had insulted her OA bylaws. Bad move, me. The barrier didn't budge, but her foot did. Gwen slipped backward, landed in a patch of compost runoff, and screamed like someone who just realized her gold-plated wine fridge was now landlocked. I nearly offered her a towel but figured she'd try to regulate its texture. By noon, the barriers had gone semi-viral. Neighbor kids named them like local pets, Chunky, the Enforcer, and Freedom Rock. I caught one couple taking selfies in front of them with a sign that said, "We love property rights." The HOA's group chat, according to a little bird named Darla, had exploded. Gwen called it, "Oh neighborly fortification." I called it a reminder that laws don't care about laminate and clipboards. What really burned her toast, I'd done it all legal, with documents, measurements, and a permit filed so tight it could hold soup. She came back around sunset wearing sunglasses and a face like she just licked a lemon wedge in front of her enemies. "You can't just do this," she hissed, me. "I am the duly appointed president of this community." I raised an eyebrow. Show me the map where my land is your community. She stormed off like a Hallmark villain late for a closing scene. Me high heels clicking across gravel like a gavel of broken delusion. When you build a kingdom on intimidation, don't be surprised when someone drops a moat, especially if they know how to pour concrete. She just hit a wall, literally, and now she's calling back up with badges. Next up, polos, permits, and panic. Some men wear uniforms, others just iron their HOA polo and declare war on common sense. Me Deputy Roy Sneed pulled up in his county cruiser looking like he'd just come from a bake sale and a bar fight. He knocked on my door, not with urgency, but the soft patience of a man who'd seen lawn disputes evolve into federal lawsuits. Got a call from a very loud woman in a beige crossover. He said, claims you're blocking community infrastructure. I offered him black coffee and a seat under the shade of my porch. 5 minutes later, we were passing deed papers like poker cards at a family reunion. Roy read every word, traced every red-marked boundary with a mechanical pencil, and let out a sigh that sounded like it came with mileage. Yep, these barriers are on your land. Nothing illegal here. Gwen, who had arrived in full spectator mode, marched up mid-verdict wearing her usual delusion and a new visor that read, "Community first." Officer, he's violating the aesthetic harmony of our driveway cohesion plan. Roy blinked twice. Mom, you can't zone someone out of their own ranch. If logic was a pie, she just lost the recipe in the oven. Word spread like wildfire on a dry prairie. Half the community wanted my head on a fence-a-post, angry about their delayed Amazon packages and detoured pizza deliveries. The other half, quietly relieved, they started showing up in 2s and 3s, telling stories like confessionals. She made me take down a swing set, one said. Told me the color turquoise violated community tranquility. Another whispered, she said my chicken coop looked militant. Her HOA wasn't a club. It was a weapon disguised as a welcome brochure. And folks were finally realizing they'd been enlisted, not welcomed. I found a flyer taped to my gate the next day. Emergency HOA meeting attendance mandatory. Bold letters, triple underlined, like someone printed it while panicking on decaf. I didn't bother RSVPing. If I wanted to hear unqualified people make up rules, I'd attend a toddler debate. Meanwhile, Gwen had taken to pacing the barriers like a general inspecting enemy fortifications. You're a disruptive element in this community, she barked one morning. I smiled, holding my coffee. Funny, that's what my tractor said about you. Deputy Roy came back 2 days later, this time just to talk, said Gwen had filed an official complaint again. But with no standing, no jurisdiction, and no paperwork that passed the sniff test, her complaints were circling the drain like overcooked spaghetti. She's bluffing, Roy said. But people like her, they don't fold. They escalate. I nodded, already feeling the gears turning. Because Gwen didn't just want compliance, she wanted conquest. And something told me her next play wasn't coming from an HOA binder. It was coming from a printer and a plot. Power without truth is just a megaphone for nonsense. And eventually, even the loudest lie runs out of batteries. Her house of rules is cracking, but she's not done yet. She's got a printer, a license, an lie too big to ignore. Nothing says trustworthy leader, like forged maps and expired toner cartridges. That's what Darla muttered when we spread out Gwen's latest HOA expansion documents across my kitchen table and compared them to the originals from the county. Her map looked like someone traced my property lines using a highlighter and a hangover. The signatures were fuzzy, the stamps looked photoshopped, and the approval date was missing, unless Gwen had a time machine and county approval on Sundays. We drove straight to the clerk's office and sure enough, the real records told the truth. No boundary changes had ever been authorized. She drew me into the HOA with a printer and a prayer. I said, shaking my head. Darla folded her arms like a woman watching a toddler explain why the dog signed the homework. It's not a neighborhood, Eli. It's a stage play. And she thinks she's the star, armed with real documents. I made copies, packed them into a folder thick enough to qualify as a weapon, and walked into the emergency HOA meeting like I was serving subpoena salad at a potluck. Gwen was halfway through a PowerPoint slide titled, Community Beautification Through Legal Encouragement, when I stepped up front and set down the truth. These are the actual county records, I said, flipping through pages like a lawyer on daytime television. No approval, no signatures, no rights. Just glitter and gall. The room froze. You could hear Gwen's Bluetooth click off. One man in the back muttered, "Wait, we've been paying for what now?" Another neighbor pulled out his phone and started live streaming. And just like that, the HOA's illusion of power evaporated faster than Gwen's spray tan in July. Gwen tried to salvage control like a lifeguard yelling at a tidal wave. These documents are intentionally misleading, she barked. This man is undermining order. I leaned into the mic like I was announcing lottery numbers. You can't find people if they don't belong to your club. The crowd erupted, not in applause but in confusion, rage, and a few IKNWIT gasps from the back row. Me. Darla grinned next to me like she'd just watched her high school nemesis trip at prom. By the time the meeting adjourned, Reed imploded. The HOA group chat had turned into a digital crime scene. One guy demanded a refund. Another asked if they could sue. Gwen stormed out, knocking over a recycling bin like it personally betrayed her. She called me a toxic influence, which I took as a compliment. After all, toxins are just elements that reveal what's fake when you apply a little pressure. The only thing faster than a lie is the silence that follows when it's exposed. Especially when it's printed on stolen letterhead. Gwen's paper crown just got shredded, but cornered queens still have matches. Up next, the arson clause. Fire solves nothing, unless your plan is to turn yourself into a viral felony. Gwen must have decided concrete wasn't persuasive enough. So she went full bonfire Barbie and tried to torch my barriers like she was auditioning for Crime Scene, HOA Edition. Friday night, while most folks were watching football, she showed up in a black hoodie, neon garden gloves, and a can of gasoline like suburban espionage needed a fashion reset. What she didn't know was that my security cameras were high-def, motion-activated, and backed up to the cloud. She lit 3 matches. The barriers didn't even flinch. But the footage. It exploded online like justice with a Wi-Fi signal. Deputy Roy rolled in before the fumes could clear. Gwen stood there, holding a plastic lighter like it doubled as a badge. "I am the law of community order," she screamed, right as Roy cuffed her beside a "no dumping" sign. Her mugshot dropped online faster than a casserole at a church fight, instantly mimed with captions like "Karen v. Concrete Final Round" and "Flame on me, Felony Queen." Gwen didn't just cross the line, she lit it, danced on it, and face-planted into it while live streaming. The fallout was biblical. Her real estate license revoked. Her compliance fund, bank account, frozen. The HOA collapsed like a souffle in a marching band. Residents who once feared her started comparing property values like newly freed citizens reading emancipation papers. For the first time in years, the town held a real community meeting, not with mandates, but with neighbors, snacks, and one unanimous rule: no more Gwen. She melted down like a candle in a flamethrower factory. Darla said, passing lemonade as the new vote leader. One guy brought cupcakes shaped like barriers. Another offered to paint murals on them. And I just sat back, letting my coffee cool slow as I watched peace, actual peace, take root on a gravel road once ruled by terror in khakis. By the following Monday, folks were talking about creating a real association. This time built on votes, not threats. Darla was nominated president before she finished her sentence. The barriers stayed, not as blockades, but as reminders that rights don't fold when pressured. And truth doesn't burn when it's concrete. Burning bridges doesn't stop the truth from crossing. It just scorches your own path to redemption. She lit the match. He lit the path. But can one man stand rebuild a real community? In rural towns, concrete isn't just infrastructure, it's revenge that sets. After Gwen's fire fiasco turned into a felony featurette, I upgraded the blockade, installed a keypad gate, programmed it with rotating access codes, and charged folks $5 a month to maintain the road. No fines, no threats, no yoga, laced HOA meetings. The same people Gwen had tried to standardize now paid me cheerfully, like tipping the bartender who kicked out the drunk guy. Kids started painting murals on the barriers. One read, "Our truth has weight." Another had a cartoon of Gwen yelling into a walkie-talkie while a rooster painted over her sign. The new family that bought Gwen's house showed up with warm pecan pie, a handshake, and no clipboard. The dad was a retired firefighter, the mom made quilts, and their daughter asked if she could add flowers to the mural. "As long as it's not a flaming crosswalk," I joked. They laughed. No laminated threats, no surprise citations, just folks who wanted to live where the rules didn't change based on whether Gwen had decaf or full calf rage that day. The barriers had gone from battleground to bulletin board, and the community felt less like a courtroom and more like a potluck again. Gwen, 18 months. Fraud, arson, forged documents, and about 3 dozen counts of being intolerable in a residential setting. Her mugshot was framed in Big Mike's hardware store next to a sign that read, "Ask about our HOA-proof fencing." But the real twist came 6 weeks later when a lawyer from 3 counties over called. "We heard what you did with your HOA situation," he said. "We'd like you to consult." I told him I wasn't a lawyer. He said, "Exactly. That's why people trust you." Next thing I know, I'm helping folks in Tennessee, Arizona, and even Florida, all because I had a red marker and a stack of old deeds. The barriers stood like 8-ton sermons, preached without a single word. That's what one local reporter wrote after doing a human interest story that somehow turned into a statewide debate about rural rights. Me. I didn't want the fame, I just wanted my peace. But apparently, standing up to a laminated lie made me a folk hero. Me. Mavis called me the apostle of asphalt. Big Hank just called me Professor Concrete. I prefer to lie, the guy who still fixed tractors and made his own coffee, but I let it slide. Now, me every so often, I walk the length of those barriers with a wrench in one hand and a quiet pride in the other. They're not just concrete, they're conversation, they're memory. Me, and they're proof that sometimes the smallest stand, done right, echoes farther than the loudest law book. Respect is earned, land is defended. Truth, me. That stuff's heavier than concrete when it lands. Ever been bullied by someone with a title and a laminator? Share your comeback below, and remember justice doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes, it wears grease boots and knows how to pour concrete. If you believe standing up for what's right still matters, hit that like button. Drop a comment if you've ever had to deal with a clipboard tyrant, me, or if you fought for your land, your name, or your dignity. And don't forget to subscribe, because the next story might just be about you. Thanks for writing. And remember, some walls are built to divide, but the best ones, they teach people how to stand. Got your own HOA horror story, me? Drop it in the comments. Let's laugh at the madness together. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we have another incredible story.